Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 9 of Perfect Inspiration. My name is Brian Matias. Today's shot, or rather how I got this shot, was really all about not putting my camera away when I was done. I was shooting along the Willamette River in Portland, Oregon, which is where I recently moved to, and I got a beautiful sunset. It was actually, I remember, a gorgeous sunset. When I was done shooting, I was actually shooting with a friend of mine. His name is Jeffrey Yen. You know, we essentially packed up and walked away. And as we were walking away, instead of, a lot of times what I'll do when I'm done with the shoot or if I'm walking from one place to another, depending on where I am and what the terrain is, I'll just put my camera away in my bag and fold the tripod up. And had I done this on this evening here, I'm pretty sure I would never have even walked away with this shot. And for my style of photography, I really do love urban and architectural photography. This to me, I just love. That's one of the reasons why I love living in Portland so much, is because you can get access to these highways and these bridges without any issue. There are so many of them, and you could just walk right under them and even alongside them. So to me, this is wonderful. And so the reason why I say I probably wouldn't have gotten this shot if my camera was stowed is because I wasn't really looking for it. If I didn't have my camera, I don't think I would have seen it. So what do I mean by that? Well, as I was walking across here, there's a street level right here. I quickly turned my live view on. Right, so I had my camera on my tripod, and my tripod was kind of over my shoulder. So I quickly took the camera in front of me, and I turned the live view on, and I had my ultra-wide lens on. You can see here if I turn the EXIF on, it was my Canon 14mm lens, which is the widest lens, linear lens that I own. So I saw the way these highways radiate outward, almost like a solar flare in a way. And that really caught my eye. And so to give you also a little bit of context, I'm trying to do this with all of the Perfect Inspiration episodes when it's applicable, but I want to show you where we took the shot. So this is Portland over here, and this is the Willamette River. There are these bridges over here, a bunch of them. There's the Hawthorne, the Morrison, the Burnside, the Steel Bridge. We were shooting sunset. If you zoom down here, right over here, we were on this little pier, and we're getting some really nice shots along the Esplanade, which is really fantastic. So there's no shortage of areas to shoot, especially on the water. However, when we were done, so we finished shooting, we walked back up the pier, and we were walking to our car, which was parked. Let me just close out of there. We essentially got right under here. So the car was parked right here on clay. When we walked through right under the overpass, that's when I turned around and I saw this kind of stretch. And if we go to the Google Street View, you can see I was essentially standing probably right over here, pointing my camera upward. And if we go back to the image, you can see pretty much exactly what I was trying to get. So if we go back, that's essentially what I was trying to get. However, the problem with this shot is that obviously the amount of dynamic range that the scene had exceeded the capabilities of the camera. The camera simply couldn't get all that tonal range. It metered for the underside of the highway here, and as a result, it totally blew out the entire sky. So this was one of the first few days that I had my new Canon 5D Mark III with me, which allowed me to bracket in camera 7 exposures, which was great. So the 7 exposures, here we'll go to the grid view. This is the mid-range exposure. You can see that we actually had a decent sky. It was actually very pretty. And then as we start exposing the brackets, the 7 brackets, we start to get more of that shadow detail. So you can see all the detail through, even through the darkest parts. Now if we go back, you can see that we have the detail in the brightest parts as well. So the first thing we're going to have to do is combine the best of these exposures using tone mapping. I'm going to do that using Photomatix Pro. Select all the exposures, go to File, Plug in Extras, and then Export to Photomatix Pro. Okay, so now we're in Photomatix Pro, and what I did was I hit the default button here, which resets everything to default settings. I like to do that when I show HDR tone mapping, because we will all start at the same place if we're using this product, and we hit default. The first thing I usually experiment with is the strength slider here. Usually I'll crank that up to 100 to see what it does. For a shot like this, I'm actually pretty happy with the strength slider at 100, so I'll keep it there. I can see that I have some blown out highlights over here, so I'm going to fix that with the white point slider because it's cranked so high. We actually lose some of that information, and you can see here that we've recovered it, but the overall image itself is still a little bit dark. To help with that, I'll bring up the luminosity a little bit, and I'm also going to decrease the detail contrast. Oops. There. So we're starting to get more information here. I'm going to bring the black point up just a tiny bit as well, and then bring up the gamma, which is the overall brightness. Now, a lot of times I'll say this when I'm working on an image. I typically brighten the tone mapped image up more than I normally would, because when we stylize, we're going to darken a lot of it. And so this kind of gives us a little bit of a head start there. The other thing that I always try to tell people is to avoid stylizing in tone mapping. What I mean by that is a lot of times what you can do is bring that luminosity slider up all the way, and then that detail contrast up all the way, and then bring down the gamma, and you start to get this kind of like stylized look here. It's not really good. This is not really the place for that. What you're doing in tone mapping is you're just trying to get the even exposure. So again, let's bring these down. Let's bring up the gamma. And you can see that this is a really nice kind of even exposure. It works really well for the image, a lot closer to what I would have seen with my eyes. Now that I'm done, I'll hit Save and Re-import to go back to Lightroom, and we can begin stylization. All right, so we're in Lightroom, and I put one of the original images and the tone mapped image side by side so we can see them. Let me put us into lights out mode, which is achieved by hitting the L key twice. You can see that we can have a totally night and day difference here. We've recovered all of that information that we otherwise lost, and we even brought out some more information in the darkest part of the image that we didn't have. So that right here is probably the best illustration that I can give you for this image of why tone mapping and HDR works for photography, because it does give you the ability to wrangle in all that information. All right, I'm going to get out of lights out mode and get out of the compare mode, just so that we can start working. So what I'm going to start doing is, the first thing I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to send this image to Photoshop, because I'm going to utilize the content aware tools that they have there. They're actually really, really powerful, and I want to take care of fixing a few things here. So to do that, I'm just going to go to Photo, Edit In, and select Adobe Photoshop CS5. Okay, here we are in Adobe Photoshop CS5, and the reason why I brought it here to Photoshop was because the content-aware tools that I have here are really powerful in helping me get rid of areas that I really don't care for. So the first area that I want to fix is this here with this line. I'm just going to take my lasso tool really quickly and just make a selection in this corner. And then I'm going to go to the Edit, Fill command, and make sure that under the contents I'm using content-aware, and I'll hit OK. And so that does a really nice job of fixing that and blending it together. All right, now with that, I'm going to go down here and try to get rid of both of these. I'm going to make a, oops, that's not a good selection. Let's make a better one here. I'm just going to make a selection around both of these, and then go to Edit, Fill, and then hit OK. And that does a really nice job of blending that out. I'm going to take another selection over here, Shift Delete. Let's see how that works. That does a pretty good job. I'm going to make one more selection for this corner here since it looks kind of off. Fill that in a little bit better. And I can get rid of that little spot there once I'm done. For this area here, I'm going to try also making a selection. So I'm just going to make this lasso selection here. And then go to Edit, Fill, hit OK. That does a pretty good job here. I'm going to make, you can see that we have some swatches that we need to fix. It's not a problem. Sometimes we'll just go ahead and make selections around them. If it gets kind of cumbersome, there are other tools like the spot healing brush, which is right over here, that we can try to make a drawing selection right there. And that does a better job of sealing it in. And then again, this area here, we'll just heal that. So it does a really nice job there. You know, a few steps taken, but it's better than having those distractions in the image. Since I'm in Photoshop, I might as well just start sending the image and stylizing it from Photoshop. We have this really cool on-one panel built into Photoshop. So if you install the suite or any one of the individual products, you can access them right from within this application. To do that, just go to Window, Extensions, and select On1, and that will pop the panel up for you. I'm going to start by sending it to Perfect Effects so we can stylize. I do that just by double-clicking on the Perfect Effects title from the panel. All right, so here we are in Perfect Effects. Let's go ahead and start stylizing. Usually, I'll apply a glow to my image towards the end of the stylization, but here I'm actually going to start with a glow. I'm going to go to the glows, and I'm going to the rich glow. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because the rich glow is going to give me the effect that I want for the most amount of the image. I want to start with this kind of a look. Except what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blending options, and I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. Now with that done, I'm going to bring the strength of the overall effect to 0, and I'm going to bring it up, kind of stopping where I'm happy. I'm going for something pretty dark, pretty sinister. Something around, 80% or so. All right, so now I'm going to hit Apply to commit that, and I'm going to hit Add. Now the next thing that I want to do is change the overall tone of this image. And to do that, and by tone I mean the color tone, I'm going to go over to the Landscape category, and the first effect is called Autumn. Now, you can see that it does change the overall tone of the image. I'm going to bring that strength down to 0, bring it up to about maybe 28%, and then I'm going to change the blending options again. The blending options are a really wonderful way to kind of experiment with every effect. So you can see as I kind of hover through them. I'm going to stick with hard light here. And so you might think, all right, that's getting really dark here, and there's a method to my madness. And I'll show you right now what I'm going to do to address that. Because this area here is my focal point, for lack of better terms. I want you to focus here, and I want everything else to kind of be background. All right. So what I want to do is I want to bring out the detail in the underpass of this highway. So I'm going to go to the color and tone and go to tonal contrast. Now, a lot of times people use tonal contrast as a default. They just apply it and move on. But actually, when you apply that effect, you have all of these great options over here, these tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that brightness way up, and that's going to brighten the entire effect. Something about 52, 53%. So you could see we're getting that information back. What I'm also going to do is bring up the contrast to about maybe 15%. That's looking good. Now, the other thing that I can do is bring out the shadow area a little bit. So as I do that, I'm getting shadow recovery. And the last thing that I'm going to do is I want to drop the overall strength of the local contrast. So I'm going to bring that down about halfway. It's about 30%. Now, with that done, I can control the overall strength of that with the strength slider. So watch, if I bring this down to 0 and then bring it up, I'm going to about 65% there. Is looking good. And I only want it to apply to the bridge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my masking brush, bring up the inspector, and invert the mask, which essentially hides it. Now, it also puts the brush into a paint-in mode. I can start brushing that effect in exactly where I want it. And so you can see I'm just essentially really quickly painting only on the structures here. And you can see how we're able to bring out that detail. Now I'm going to get the finer areas here. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to bring up my mask. So if I go to the Show Mask drop down and select Overlay, I can see areas that I've missed. And this is really important because not only does it show areas that I've missed, but you can see along here I've essentially painted outside of the border of the highway. And what that can do is add a little bit of an appearance of a halo because it's so much brighter. Oops. Don't want to adjust the size of the effects bar. All right, so I'm just kind of getting my mask done here. And you can see it's not, no one said masking is a terribly exciting thing, but it's one of those things where you see how much control I have and how I'm going to great lengths to ensure that every single effect is applied to a specific area if that's my intent, which it often is when I'm stylizing. That's one of the main reasons why I love our product, is because it's actually really easy to go through here and control where the effect is applied. Now that I've finished essentially getting it pretty much where I want, I'm going to change my mode to paint out, and I'm going to kind of go and close out the border. And even if I get a little bit over the edge, I'm not worried about that. I'd rather have no transition than have that hard transition. So I'm just kind of cleaning up the edges here. The nice thing is that I only have to do this once, and I'll explain why in just a second. All right, so I'm pretty much happy here with this mask. I'm going to turn the mask off by going to the Show Mask dropdown and selecting None, and we can now move on. So what I'm going to do is hit Add, and I'm going to apply an effect under the Movie Looks category called Lord of the Rings. Now, again, I don't want this effect to apply to anywhere on the image. I just want it to apply to the highway. So if I go to the tonal contrast effect and I go to masking and copy mask, this is what I was saying. I only have to draw this once because I can go to the Lord of the Rings effect, go to masking, paste mask, and now I have that effect applied. It's only applied to the bridge, but it's at 100%, so I'm going to bring that down to 0 and only bring it up a bit because I like the look that it gives the underpass. I'll hit Add, and the last effect that I'm going to apply is one that I think doesn't get a lot of love. It's at the very end of the landscape category. It's called Vecchio. I'm going to select it, and I absolutely love what it does to the bridge. So just like before, masking, paste mask, and now I have this beautiful contrast between the warm and the dark areas. I'm going to bring it down to 0 and then slowly bring it up to about maybe 30%, and you can see that we have a really nice kind of change here. If I hide the effects bar and show you the before and the after, that's what we started with, and this is what we ended with. It's really cool, but we're not done here. I'm going to hit Apply so that we can return back to Photoshop and move on. Okay, so here we're in Photoshop, and the last thing I want to do is actually apply a little bit of focal point to really bring the eye here and render the rest of the area out of focus. So I'm going to go back to my On One panel over here, and I'm going to double click on focal point to launch it. All right, so now that we're in focal point, you remember I said how I want this main stretch to be my point of focus, and I want the rest of the image to kind of serve as a background. Normally, when you see me use focal point, I think I switch this to a planar bug. You can see if I go round to planar, I get that, but that's not giving me the effect that I want. Actually, I'm going to change it back to round, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the bug more kind of oblong until the whole bridge itself is in focus. And I mean the center bridge. Now, you can see that we've essentially got this really, really fake look over here, and that's because of the amount of blur that we have. So I'm going to start by bringing this way down. I'm going to bring it down to about 4%. And then the next thing I'm going to start to do is adjust the feather. The feather will control the transition here. And so I'm going to bring the feather up about 49, maybe even more, about 59%. That's looking pretty good. And so if I go and I select under the focus brush pane the Show Mask, you can see essentially what we're getting at here. And so I'm going to start manipulating the bug a little bit more. I'll bring it down. What I want to make sure of is that all the edges are sharp and that focus is essentially starting right around the bottom, right around here. And so you can see I'm moving the bug around just to make sure that I get the focus where I want it. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to take my focus brush now. I'm going to make sure I'm set to paint focus at 100%. And I'm just going to make these strokes along the edge here, just to make sure that I have focus through here. My plane of focus is essentially over here. Same thing down here. Just kind of bring that up a bit so we have a little bit of sharpness. I don't want any artifacting or aliasing of the edges here. So that's looking pretty good. If I bring up the mask again, I can see what I've got. I'm going to bring all this in focus too. I can see that I missed this area here, so I'll get that going. This is looking pretty good. Everything else is looking good. Now, what I'm also going to do is drop the brightness a tiny bit to further draw the eye over here. And then I'm going to drop the contrast a bit. When I'm done, I'll hit Apply so that we can return back to Photoshop, and I'll show you what we've done thus far. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and I turned off these two layers here so we can see what we've done. First, we have our original tone mapped image, and then we went to Perfect Effects to stylize, which gave us the overall look of the image. And then we went to focal point, and it's a very, very minute change, but it's really effective in my opinion in that we really bring the focus to here, which we can also accentuate in Lightroom. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this image so that we can return back to our Lightroom and finish things off. Okay, so we're in Lightroom now, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the Develop module, and we're going to start working on some of the sliders here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out some of that shadow detail. I want to actually make it a little bit brighter, and by increasing that shadow slider, we're getting more of that detail there. I'm going to drop the white level a bit, and I'm going to increase the black level a bit, push it out a bit, so we're getting more information here. It's not looking too bad. I'm going to bring the clarity up so we get a little bit more snap in the image, and I'm also going to boost the vibrance just a tiny bit to pop just the right amount of color. Now what I want to do is further bring the eye here, so I'm going to take my graduated filter. I'm going to go to the exposure slider, and I'm going to bring that down pretty high just to see what we're going to do. I'm also going to add a little bit of cool temperature using the white balance slider to help contrast using temperature. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring this out until it kind of hits the border over here, and you can see that. If I hit H, I can actually take that and bring it over here, and then take this area and bring it out just by dragging out the lines. I'm going to hit New, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to bring this right around there and bring that out. And then a final one, hit New, and then bring that straight up here to around over there. I can hit H to hide those little pips, and you can see if I toggle the before and the after, this is what we brought back into Photoshop. This is what we were able to do in Lightroom to kind of really bring things out even more. So that's kind of what happens. And again, if I had my camera in my bag, odds are I would have walked right by this. And I really love this shot. This shot is just something that really speaks to me. So make sure you, when you're walking from place to place, keep the camera out. Invest in a comfortable camera strap, or just have it on your tripod with your tripod over your shoulder, just so you never miss the shot. Because that is I'd say one of the bigger tragedies of photography is just missing the shot. Be sure to download the preset that I used here. I saved the preset from Perfect Effects to get this look. Download it using the link right below, and I look forward to seeing you next week for episode number 10. Thank you very much.